The rain poured heavily that night, drumming against the windows of the small, cozy house where a family of 4 lived, a mother, a father, and their 2 young boys. The wind howled like a restless spirit, making the trees sway violently. Inside, the family sat together in the living room, the warm glow of the fireplace casting long shadows on the walls. The father, a kind-hearted man with gentle eyes, glanced outside. "It's really coming down out there," he murmured. Just as he said that, a faint noise caught his attention, a soft, almost inaudible knock on the front door. The mother frowned. Who could be out in this weather? The older of the 2 boys, curious and bold, ran to the door before his parents could stop him. When he opened it, a small figure stood there, drenched from head to toe. It was a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, her clothes torn and muddy, her dark hair clinging to her pale face. But the most unsettling thing was her eyes, wide, fearful, and eerily silent. The family was stunned. The mother quickly rushed forward, wrapping the shivering child in a thick blanket. "Oh, sweetheart, where did you come from?" she asked softly. But the girl said nothing. She just stared at them, her lips pressed tightly together. The father exchanged a worried glance with his wife. There were no missing child reports in their small town, no news of any accidents nearby. It was as if the girl had appeared out of nowhere. They brought her inside, gave her warm clothes, and sat her by the fire. The boys, though young, sensed something strange about the situation but were too fascinated by the silent girl to be afraid. They offered her toys, but she didn't react. She simply sat there, clutching the blanket around her like a shield. That night, as the storm raged outside, the parents debated what to do. They couldn't just turn her away. "We'll call the authorities in the morning," the father said. "Maybe she's lost, and her family is looking for her." But the mother hesitated. Something about the girl's hollow gaze told her there was more to this story. "What if she has nowhere to go?" she whispered. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. The family tried again to talk to the girl, but she remained silent. They took her to the local police station, but no one had reported a missing child matching her description. With no other options, the authorities asked if the family could take her in temporarily while they investigated. The parents agreed. They didn't know it then, but their lives were about to change forever. Days turned into weeks, and the girl stayed with them. She never spoke, not a single word, but she began to show small signs of trust, sitting closer to the boys during meals, watching the mother cook with quiet interest. The family grew attached to her, treating her as one of their own. They even gave her a name, though they weren't sure if it was hers. Then, one evening, as the mother tucked her into bed, the girl did something unexpected. She grabbed the mother's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling. The mother froze. "What is it, sweetheart?" And then, in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, the girl spoke her first word, a single, chilling sentence that turned the mother's blood to ice. "They're coming for me." The mother's breath caught in her throat. Before she could ask what the girl meant, the child's eyes darted to the window, wide with terror. Outside, the shadows seemed to move on their own. Something, or someone, was out there. Watching. Waiting. And the family realized too late that this silent girl had brought something dark into their home. The mother's heart pounded in her chest as she followed the girl's terrified gaze toward the window. The curtain swayed slightly, but there was no wind, no explanation for the movement. She tightened her grip on the girl's small hand, feeling the child's fear like an electric current. "Who's coming for you?" she whispered urgently. But the girl didn't answer. Instead, she pulled her hand away, curled into a tight ball under the blankets, and shut her eyes as if willing herself to disappear. The mother hesitated, then slowly walked to the window. She pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The yard was empty. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows, but nothing moved. No footsteps, no strange figures, just the quiet hum of the night. Still, the mother couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She turned back to the girl, who now lay perfectly still, pretending to sleep. The mother sighed and gently stroked her hair. "You're safe here," she murmured, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. Downstairs, the father was reading a book while the two boys played quietly with wooden blocks. The mother walked in, her face pale. "What's wrong?" the father asked, noticing her expression. She sat beside him, keeping her voice low so the boys wouldn't hear. She spoke. The father's eyes widened. "What did she say?" "They're coming for me." A heavy silence settled between them. The boys, sensing the sudden tension, stopped playing and looked up. "Who's coming?" the older boy asked. The parents exchanged a glance. "Nothing, sweetheart," the mother said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just grown-up talk." But the boys weren't fooled. They had seen the way the girl sometimes stared at nothing, how she flinched at sudden noises. They knew something wasn't right. That night, the parents lay awake in bed, listening to every creak of the house. "Do you think she's in danger?" the mother whispered. The father rubbed his temples. "I don't know. But we can't ignore this. Tomorrow, we'll talk to the police again. Maybe they've found something." Morning came, and with it, a strange calm. The mother's scream tore through the house. The shadow at the window vanished in an instant, but the terror it left behind clung to the air like smoke. The father came running, the two boys right behind him. "What happened?" She couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as she pointed at the window, now empty except for the faint reflection of their frightened faces. The girl had backed into a corner, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her breathing fast and shallow. The father rushed to the window and yanked it open, leaning out to scan the yard. Nothing. No footsteps, no rustling bushes, just the quiet hum of the afternoon. But the dog was still growling, his fur standing on end. The older boy, trying to be brave, stepped closer to the girl. "Who was that?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly raised a finger to her lips. "Be quiet." The family stood frozen, listening. For what, they didn't know. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of twigs snapping near the edge of the woods behind their house. Someone was out there. The father made a decision fast. "Everyone, stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm calling the police." While he dialed, the mother herded the children into the living room, away from the windows. The girl wouldn't sit. She paced like a trapped animal, her eyes darting to every shadow. The police arrived quickly this time, 2 officers, their expressions serious as the father explained what had happened. They searched the property, flashlights sweeping across the trees as dusk settled in. Nothing. No footprints beyond the one the father had seen earlier. No signs of forced entry. No evidence that anyone had been there at all. One of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes, crouched in front of the girl. "Sweetheart, can you tell us who you saw?" The girl stared at her, unblinking. Then, slowly, she shook her head. The officer sighed and stood. "We'll patrol the area tonight. If you see anything else, call us immediately." As soon as the police left, the father turned to his wife. "We can't stay here tonight. Let's go to your brother's house, just until we figure this out." The mother nodded, already packing bags. The boys, confused but sensing the fear in their parents' voices, didn't argue. Only the girl resisted. When the mother tried to guide her toward the door, she planted her feet and shook her head violently. "No," she whispered. "Roads aren't safe." The father knelt in front of her. "We have to go. It's not safe here either." Her eyes filled with tears. They watched the roads. A chill ran down the mother's spine. "Who are they?" The girl opened her mouth, then flinched as the power suddenly cut out, plunging the house into darkness. Outside, the dog began barking wildly. Then, silence. The father grabbed a flashlight. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice tight. But before he could move, the girl lunged forward and grabbed his arm. For the first time, her voice was clear, sharp with fear. "Don't go outside. They're here." In the pitch-black house, the family huddled together, listening. The only sound was their own shaky breaths. Then, a knock on the back door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just 3 soft taps, like someone politely asking to be let in. The mother clutched the boys closer. The father raised the flashlight like a weapon, aiming it at the door. Another knock. The girl began to whisper something under her breath, words they didn't understand, a language that sounded old and strange. The knocking stopped. For 1 heartbeat, 2, nothing happened. Then the doorknob began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly, the metallic creak deafening in the silent house. The father lunged forward and slammed his weight against the door just as it began to open. Something, or someone, pushed back from the other side with terrifying strength. "Help me," the father grunted, bracing himself. The mother rushed to his side, adding her strength to keep the door shut. The boys stood frozen, their wide eyes reflecting the dim flashlight beam. The girl didn't move. She kept whispering those strange words, her voice growing louder, more urgent. With a sudden thud, the pressure against the door vanished. The night outside went eerily still again, no wind, no animals, just silence. The father didn't relax. He kept his shoulder pressed against the wood, breathing hard. What in God's name was that? The mother turned toward the girl. "You knew that would happen," she said, not as an accusation but in awe. "What were you saying?" The girl's whisper faded. She looked exhausted, her small body swaying slightly. "Old words," she murmured. "From before." Before anyone could ask what that meant, a new sound cut through the dark, scratching. Slow, deliberate claws dragging against the house's outer walls, moving toward the front windows. The older boy grabbed his brother's hand. "It's going around the house," he breathed. The father made a split-second decision. "Upstairs. Now." They moved as a group, the father leading with the flashlight, the mother herding the children. The girl stumbled, her legs weak, and the mother scooped her up without hesitation. The scratching followed. As they reached the top of the stairs, the power suddenly came back on, the lights flickering to life with a harsh buzz. The family blinked in the sudden brightness, but the relief lasted only a second. Bang! Something heavy slammed against the front door downstairs. Then again. And again. The father ran to the bedroom window overlooking the front yard. "There's no one there," he said, voice strained. "But the door, it's shaking like something's hitting it." The girl struggled in the mother's arms, reaching weakly toward the hallway closet. "Salt," she whispered. "Need salt." The mother didn't question it. She set the girl down and yanked open the closet, grabbing the big container of salt they kept for winter sidewalks. The girl took it with trembling hands, then did something that made the boys gasp. She poured a thick line of salt across the top of the stairs. "They can't cross this," she said, her voice firmer now. "Not unless we let them." Another bang against the door downstairs. Wood splintered. The father backed toward his family, his face pale. "What are they?" The girl looked at him with eyes too old for her face. "The ones who take children. The ones who made me run." A terrible crash echoed through the house as the front door gave way. Heavy footsteps thudded in the hallway below. But nothing came up the stairs. The family stood perfectly still, listening to the sounds of something moving down there, pacing, searching. Then, a voice that didn't sound human at all called up in a sickeningly sweet tone. "Come down, little bird. We just want to take you home." The girl's breath hitched. The mother pulled her close. The father looked at the salt line, then at his family. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we don't break this line." Downstairs, the footsteps stopped. Then the lights went out again. The darkness felt alive. Huddled together at the top of the stairs, the family held their breath as the silence stretched on. The only sound was the frantic hammering of their own hearts. The girl clung to the mother's sleeve, her fingers ice-cold. Then, a creak. A floorboard groaned near the bottom of the stairs. Then another, closer. Something was coming up, step by careful step, despite the salt line. The father tightened his grip on the flashlight, ready to swing. The mother pulled the boys behind her. The girl suddenly lunged forward, her small hands scattering the salt line in one desperate swipe. "No," the father hissed, but it was too late. A gust of freezing wind roared up the stairs, sending the salt flying like a blizzard. The family staggered back as the temperature plummeted. The girl stood in front of them, arms outstretched, shouting words that made the air vibrate. The footsteps halted. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then a voice, dry as dead leaves, hissed from the darkness. "You can't hide forever." The girl screamed back in that same strange language, her voice too powerful for her small frame. The house shook. A window shattered downstairs. And just like that, the presence was gone. The lights flickered back on. The house stood still and silent, as if nothing had happened. Except for the broken front door. Except for the salt scattered everywhere. Except for the girl, who collapsed to her knees, her energy spent. The mother scooped her up immediately, pressing a hand to her forehead. "She's freezing." The father ran to the broken front door, peering into the empty night. "We can't stay here," he said, voice rough. "We need to go. Now." The boys, still shaking, nodded fast. The older one grabbed his little brother's hand. "What were those things?" No one answered. They packed in a frenzy, clothes, food, flashlights. The mother wrapped the girl in 2 thick blankets, but she still shivered violently. As the father loaded the car, the girl stirred, her voice a fragile thread. "They'll follow. But I know a place." The father paused. "Where?" "The red house. In the woods." "They can't go there." The parents exchanged a look. The only red house nearby was an abandoned hunting cabin deep in the forest, a place kids dared each other to approach but never entered. The mother hesitated. "Why can't they go there?" The girl's eyelids fluttered. "Because that's where the old ones buried them." A chill ran down the father's spine. But with no better options, he nodded. "Then that's where we're going." The drive through the woods was a nightmare. Every shadow seemed to move. Twice, the father swore he saw figures standing between the trees, watching them pass. The girl lay across the back seat, her head in the mother's lap, drifting in and out of consciousness. When they finally reached the cabin, it looked even worse than they remembered: rotting wood, a sagging roof, the paint so faded it was barely red anymore. But the moment the car stopped, the girl sat up, suddenly alert. "Hurry," she said, scrambling out before anyone could stop her. The family followed, flashlights cutting through the gloom. The cabin door hung crooked on its hinges, but the girl didn't go inside. Instead, she went to the back, where an old stone well stood, half covered in vines. "Here," she said, pulling at the vines. "The door is here." The father helped her clear the growth, revealing not a well cover, but a heavy wooden door set into the ground. A root cellar, maybe. The girl traced her fingers over strange symbols carved into the wood, the same kind she'd been whispering earlier. "They can't touch this place," she said. The old ones made sure. The father pried the door open. A set of stone steps led down into darkness. The smell that rose up wasn't damp earth or decay, but something unexpected: herbs. Sage. Smoke. The girl took the first step down. "Come on," she said. "Before the hollow men find us again." And with no other choice, the family followed her into the dark. The air inside the hidden chamber was thick with the scent of dried herbs and aged wood. As the family descended the stone steps, their flashlight beams cut through decades of dust, revealing walls covered in the same strange symbols the girl had traced outside. At the bottom of the steps stood a round wooden table, its surface carved with intricate patterns. Candles, some burnt down to stubs, others seemingly new, lined the edges. The mother's breath caught when she noticed small handprints pressed into the wax. Children's handprints. The girl moved with purpose now, lighting fresh candles with matches from a rusted tin. The flickering light revealed something else: dozens of names scratched into the stone walls, some so old they were barely visible. The younger boy reached out to touch one. "Who are all these people?" The girl didn't look up from her task. "The ones who got away." A heavy silence fell over the room. The father examined the nearest wall, squinting at the names. Some were dated, 1923, 1957, as recent as last year. His blood ran cold when he realized what they were looking at. "A record," he whispered. "Of survivors." The mother pulled the boys closer. "Survivors of what?" Before anyone could answer, a sound echoed from above, a slow, dragging footstep across the cabin floor. Then another. The family froze. The girl blew out all but one candle, plunging most of the room into darkness. "Quiet," she mouthed. Above them, the footsteps paused. Then came a sound that made the younger boy whimper, fingernails dragging along the outside of the cellar door. Scritch. 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 The father grabbed an old iron poker leaning against the wall, holding it like a weapon. The mother pressed the boys behind her. The girl stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed upward. Then, a voice. Not the dry whisper from before, but something worse. It sounded almost human. Almost kind. "We know you're down there," it cooed. "Come out, and we'll let the others go." The older boy clenched his fists. "Liar," he whispered, so quiet only his family could hear. The scratching grew more frantic. The door rattled slightly, but didn't budge. The symbols carved into it seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. After what felt like hours, the noises stopped. The girl finally exhaled. "They can't stay long," she said. "The old wards hold them back." The mother knelt beside her. "Who are they? And how do you know all this?" The girl's hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. When she unfolded it, the family saw a photograph, faded, torn at the edges. It showed a group of children standing in front of this very cabin, smiling. One of them looked exactly like the girl. "My grandmother," the girl said, pointing to her doppelganger. "She was the last one who got away. Before me." The father's throat went dry. "How long have these things been taking children?" The girl's eyes darkened. "Longer than this town has been here." As night deepened outside, the family huddled around the table while the girl explained in halting sentences. The hollow men had many names across many years. They took children who wouldn't be missed, runaways, orphans, the forgotten. They could mimic voices, twist minds, make parents forget their own sons and daughters ever existed. "But why?" the younger boy asked, voice shaking. The girl touched the photograph. "Because hungry things always come back to eat." A sudden thud from above made them all jump. Then another. And another, like something heavy being dragged across the cabin floor. The girl's face went pale. "They're trying something new." The banging grew louder, shaking dust from the ceiling. Then came a new sound, wood splintering. The father leapt to his feet. They're breaking through the cabin walls to get to the door from the side. The girl scrambled to the far wall, pressing her hands against the stones. We need to wake them up. Wake who up? The mother cried. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she began chanting, the same words she'd used in the house, but louder now. The candle flames shot up unnaturally high. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. The banging stopped abruptly. Then came screams, not human, not animal, but something in between. The sound of something in pain. The girl swayed on her feet, her nose bleeding. They remember now, she whispered. The old ones remember. The cellar door burst open. But it wasn't the hollow men who came down the stairs. The figure standing at the top of the cellar steps was impossibly tall, its silhouette stretching up into the darkness beyond the doorframe. Moonlight from the broken cabin roof glinted off something metallic in its hand, an old farming sickle, its curved blade blackened with age. The family shrank back as the figure descended. With each step, the candle flames bent toward it like plants seeking sunlight. The air smelled suddenly of turned earth and autumn leaves. Then the light caught its face. The mother gasped. It wasn't a monster. It was an old woman, ancient, her skin like weathered bark, her white hair braided with dried flowers. But her eyes were exactly like the girl's. The girl made a small, wounded sound in her throat. Babushka? The old woman's stern expression cracked. She opened her arms, and the girl ran to her, burying her face in the woman's patched apron. The father kept his grip on the iron poker, though his hands shook. What are you? The old woman studied them with those unsettlingly young eyes. When she spoke, her voice creaked like an old tree in the wind. The first children they couldn't take. She set the sickle on the table with a heavy clunk and reached into her apron pocket, pulling out a handful of acorns. She scattered them across the carved surface, muttering under her breath. The acorns rolled in strange patterns, clustering together before suddenly splitting apart. The girl watched intently. They're coming back, she translated. With more. The old woman nodded grimly. She pointed to the photograph still lying on the table, then to the names on the wall, and finally to the family, her meaning clear. You must add your names. The mother hesitated. Will that protect us? The old woman's smile held no comfort. She made a slicing motion across her palm, an offering. The screaming outside didn't sound human. It was a high, keening wail, like whine through dead branches, like animals caught in traps. The cellar door rattled violently as something heavy slammed against it. The girl tightened her grip on the sickle, her knuckles white. The mother pulled both boys into her arms. The father stood in front of them, still clutching the iron poker, though his face was pale. What's happening out there? The girl didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the door, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The candle flames flickered wildly, casting monstrous shadows across the walls. Then, as suddenly as it began, the screaming stopped. Silence. A single, heavy thud hit the door. Then, nothing. The family waited, frozen. A minute passed. 2. Then, softly, a new sound, scratching. Slow. Deliberate. The girl's breath hitched. No. The scratching became more insistent, nails dragging down the wood in a terrible, familiar rhythm. Scritch. 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 The same sound from their house. The same sound from before. The hollow men hadn't been defeated. They'd just changed tactics. The girl suddenly lunged forward, pressing her palm flat against the door. She began whispering those same old words, the ones that had protected them before. But this time, her voice shook. This time, the words sounded weaker. The scratching grew louder. The father moved to her side. "What can we do?" The girl's eyes were wide with fear. "The names," she gasped. "They have to remember us." The mother understood first. She grabbed the boys' hands and pulled them to the wall where their names were written. "Touch them," she urged. "Keep touching them." As their fingers made contact with the stone, the symbols around them began to glow faintly. The scratching stuttered, but didn't stop. The girl turned to the father, her face desperate. "You too. All of us. Together." He pressed his hand against his name. The glow intensified. The scratching faded slightly. But the door still shook. The girl looked down at the sickle in her hands, then at her own bloody palm. Understanding flashed across her face. "Not just names," she whispered. "Promises." Before anyone could stop her, she dragged the sickle's blade across her palm again, reopening the wound. Blood welled up, dark and thick. She pressed her hand to the wall beside her name, and this time, she pushed, as if reaching through the stone itself. The effect was instantaneous. The glow became a blaze. The scratching turned to screeching. The entire cellar trembled as the symbols burned brighter than ever before. And then, from beyond the door, came the old woman's voice, clear as a bell. "Now!" The girl screamed one final word. And the door exploded inward. But it wasn't the hollow men who came through. It was the others. Dozens of them, children of all ages, some barely more than shadows, others so solid they looked alive. They streamed past the family, their forms flickering like candle flames, their eyes blazing with the same unearthly light as the symbols on the walls. The last to enter was the old woman. Or what was left of her. Her form was translucent now, her edges blurring like smoke. But she stood tall, her sickle raised high. When she spoke, her voice echoed with countless others. No more stolen children. No more forgotten names. Then she turned, and led the charge back out into the night. The family stumbled after them, barely comprehending what they were seeing. Outside, the woods were alive with movement. The hollow men, now fully visible, were retreating, their shapeless forms recoiling from the advancing spirits. But they weren't fast enough. The old woman's sickle flashed in the moonlight. The other children surged forward. And one by one, the hollow men burned, their forms dissolving into wisps of black smoke that scattered on the wind. The last one, the largest, turned to flee. The girl raised her own sickle. "No," she screamed. And threw it with all her strength. The blade found its mark. The creature howled, a sound that shook the trees, before bursting apart like rotten wood. Silence fell. Dawn was breaking. The spirits didn't linger. One by one, they faded, some with smiles, some with tears, all with a final glance at the family who had helped set them free. The old woman was last. She cupped the girl's face in her translucent hands. No words passed between them, just a look of terrible love and sorrow. Then she too was gone. The girl collapsed to her knees, the fight finally leaving her. The family gathered around, holding her up, holding each other. It was over. Epilogue. The town never quite understood what happened that night. The police found the family wandering near the highway at dawn, covered in dirt and leaves but otherwise unharmed. The old red cabin? When investigators went to look, they found only a burned-out shell, though neighbors swore it had been standing just the day before. The girl stayed with the family. She still didn't speak much, but when she did, it was always important. She started school. She played with the boys. At night, she no longer stared at the windows in fear. But sometimes, when the wind was just right, the mother would catch her whispering to someone no one else could see. And on those nights, The family would wake to find fresh wildflowers on their doorstep, the same kind that had once been braided in an old woman's hair. As for the cellar wall, if you know where to look, you can still see their names there. All 5 of them. And if you press your hand to the stone, just right, you might feel something remarkable. The faint, steady pulse of a promise kept.